So On Ancient Earth is an exhibition about the relationships we have with what lies beyond the outer edges of Earth's atmosphere. This is the third in a series of artist talks accompanying the exhibition. And you can see the exhibition at theartistexpeditionsociety.com/onancientearth. This talk series is broadcasted and tuned into from many places around the world. But the central base of this exhibition and webinar series is Alice Springs, Mumbantua, Australia, which is on Aranda country. And I'd like to acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging. There is a very insightful welcome to country by local Aranda woman Kumali Riley, associated with the exhibition, and it's available to view on the website until the exhibition closes tomorrow. So this exhibition and talk series is a part of the Desert Festival, and the Desert Festival is an annual arts festival that happens in Alice Springs. The talk series itself has been funded very kindly by the Alice Springs Town Council, and On Ancient Earth, the exhibition itself, was co-curated by Lumen's Rebecca Huxley, Louise Beer, who's on the call right now co-hosting, and Melanie King and myself, Anna Dakin from the Artist Expedition Society. And today's speakers are Jo Lane, who's a Melbourne-based artist whose practice is based in botanical drawing, but has evolved through many forms. Currently, Jo works with drawing, animation, sculpture, film, and photography, probing ideas of identity, dislocation, and social responsibility. We also have Anthony Carr speaking. Anthony is a London-based artist who's currently living in Victoria in Canada. Anthony's practice is centered around experimental photography and sculpture, often blurring the boundary between the two. And his video piece, Observing a Baker's Dozen, a lunar study in variations of size and shape, inspired by the Hembury meteorite craters just a couple of 100 kilometers south of the exhibition location, will be speaking on a recorded video for us after Jo. Jo is our first speaker, so Jo Lane, over to you.
Thank you. The work that I submitted for this exhibition is a drawing that I did that directly copied a drawing that exists in England that I've loved for many, many years. It's in the Museum of the History of Science in Oxford. It's a drawing. The drawing that I did is behind me, but it was done in an absolute grid-like manner to honor the drawing that was done of the moon in 1795. And I started to think about the time between then and now. It seems so long ago. Obviously, it's only not far after 200 years, but I also looked at what impact we have had on Earth, and now I even read, and we all read, about mining on the moon and who's trying to get the rights to this. So this drawing plus the moon has always fascinated me. I approached the museum in Oxford and asked them if
hold on there, Jo. I'm afraid we've just lost your volume for some reason. You're not muted on Zoom.
Back?
Oh, you come back. Yep, you're back.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay,
so you just
sorry.
said mining on the moon.
Okay, so the drawing that I have copied is from the Museum of History of Science in Oxford. The drawing itself was done in 1795 by John Russell, who was a very famous English portrait artist, actually, of royalty and notable people who could afford portraits to be painted of them. But he was an avid celestial enthusiast, and I would like to show you the process and the original drawing. So I'm going to share the screen. I asked the museum if I could do this. I was sent a high resolution version of his drawing, which they have, and it was for an exhibition actually at Lumen Studios in London, which it was shown in, and then I've transported it back to Australia. And I just, it's not a very long talk, but I wanted to celebrate this extraordinary ability for man and fascination with the moon. I'm just going to share the screen right now. Share, and I'll whip it. Okay, now this is part of my drawing, and you can see the grid work that I did, which I gridded up John Russell's drawing. Now I've done it in graphite, and graphite has a sheen to it, and it's also an incredibly valuable mineral that is mined from the earth. It has many applications. Drawing is not the only one, and it's becoming incredibly valuable actually because of its conductivity capability in solar and information technology. So I liked that aspect of the actual material that I've done it in. John Russell himself, and I'll show you actually in the next, this is the whole moon. This is actually 5 foot across. It took 4 sheets of paper. You can see the grid work. I tried to copy it as faithfully as possible. I constantly compared. This is his above and mine below. This is actually the drawing. It was done in pastel and crayon. John Russell made his own crayon. He actually he was dedicated to astronomical sketches of the moon for 30 years. He constantly sketched the moon, but this is the ultimate drawing that he did in the 1790s, and he had obtained a Doland achromatic refractor, which at the time was the latest in telescope technology. This is completely accurate. Every crater is the same. So the ability to see the moon in the late 1700s was not as good, obviously, as now, but this is completely accurate. This is where the drawing resides in the museum, up the stairwell. It's incredibly difficult to see, in my view. It reflects everything. And only a few years ago, they realized, when they had it reframed, they realized they had had it hanging upside down for 100 years. When they reframed it, they saw his signature and they realized this was the way that he intended it to be. And this is actually what's called a waning gibbous. Now the moon waxes and wanes, as we know, so for hundreds of years it had been actually hanging upside down, which I find rather amusing for some reason. That is my drawing next to his drawing, because his drawing had the multiple colors of the crayons that he made. There's warmth and there's coolness. Mine is direct, just only graphite on black paper. I was very keen to think of the effect that we are having on Earth, on not only our own Earth, but our atmosphere. And I came up with the idea of having an emergency light that reflected light onto my graphite of the moon. I showed, this is actually in the crypt gallery that Lumen Studios have in London. I also liked the concept of this spatial object, this beautiful moon, being held in the underground of a crypt, of the place where bodies were buried. And Lumen has this extraordinary space, and I loved it down the end of the hallway, sort of contained. I then packed it up and brought it back. The red dot on the left is the carbon emissions that were coming out of the planet when John Russell did that drawing. The red dot on the right, the statistics stop at 2013 from this particular source, where the only solid fuel emissions that came out was obviously for heating, and in the late 1700s. This is what we are doing to our atmosphere. And these are where the emissions are coming from now, from flaring, from cement, from gas, from liquid and solid fuel. The statistics are enormous. And so in a way, for me, this drawing became a piece to say it's an emergency. We have an emergency issue on our planet. I actually, I have the little, and I am passionate about that. And this moon drawing is to say our planet is in an emergency situation, and we're affecting space around us. That kind of is the story around this particular drawing. I'll turn this off now. And I just want to thank you. It's called Emergency on Earth, but it is in fact a faithful reproduction of a drawing that I think has been very unacknowledged, if that's I think it's one of the most extraordinary drawings in one of England's institutions. It's just and I wanted to honor it, and I wanted to reproduce it, and I wanted to publish it, and I wanted to compare the time then in the late 1700s with the time now as a point of reflection of what we have done as mankind on this earth.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Jo. That was really interesting. And it was really interesting to think about the moon as a kind of constant, and the earth is the thing that's changed between now and then, for sure.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Jo. That was just...
Thank you for including it in your amazing exhibition and program.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to Anthony's films.
Hi, my name is Anthony Carr, and I'm speaking to you from over the pond. Now, that could be the Atlantic or the Pacific, depending on where you are. I hope you're all well and safe, and I'm really sorry I can't join you in person. It's an honour to be invited to present my work to you, and I'm very thankful to both Anna and Louise for asking me. The show looks amazing, such diverse work, and what great company to be in. Before I start, I just want to say we in Victoria gratefully acknowledge that we are on the ancestral and unceded territories of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, and also the Wasainak peoples of the Pequotchian, Tarlip, Tsakum and Tsarut First Nations. I was born in London and studied fine art in the late 90s, specialising in printmaking, which allowed me to pursue my interest in photography. I moved to Canada in spring 2019 and I'm currently based in Victoria, the provincial capital of BC, which is right on the western edge of the country and the main reason I've had to pre-record this talk. I think I'm somewhere around 16 and a half hours behind Australia NT time, so 2/3 of a day. It's very unsociable. My practice is centred around experimental photography and sculpture, often blurring the boundary between the two. I'm interested in many things, but particularly the idea of thingness or objectness inherent in analogue photography, of the film itself of course, and the photographic print, but also the role of the camera. And I'm always looking for ways in which to emphasise this haptic quality. The raw material for a lot of my work is collected through the lens of handmade cameras, and building these cameras is often as much a part of the work as the images they collect, although I don't often and actually quite rarely show the cameras themselves. Each camera is designed with a purpose in mind. It might be to capture a specific type of image, a time of day, a subject matter, or simply to satisfy my curiosity. My approach is somewhat DIY, and I have developed an appreciation for lo-fi and alternative photographic techniques over the years, in particular pinhole photography. Now I'm going to start by showing a few of my past and current projects, and then for the second half of the talk I'll discuss the piece I've contributed to the On Ancient Earth show. So little bit of my past work. Okay, I thought I'd start with a work I made between 2016 and 2018 called Untitled, open brackets, 47 rockets, close brackets. Using a humble 35mm film canister as a pinhole camera, I've been capturing the nocturnal journey of the moon as it traverses the heavens since around 2009. These moon trail photographs include full moons, blue moons, micromoons, supermoons, and lunar eclipses. This has become a resource I have mined in a few works, and for this particular piece I used the photographs to illustrate an anecdote I had read. The story in question relates to the generally common known mathematical truth, but physical impossibility of repeatedly folding a sheet of standard paper in half until it reaches the moon. Depending on which source you read and the thickness of paper you start with, the total number of folds is somewhere between 42 and 47. Now I like the number 47, it's a prime number, so I stuck with that. Incidentally, if you fold a sheet 50 times, you'll reach the sun. Obviously it's purely theoretical and a bit of fun, but it got me thinking about the folding potential of photographic paper and what would happen if you keep folding it. I started experimenting, and after trawling the internet looking for fairly simple origami instructions and videos, I quickly discovered that space travel was a popular subject. So I combined the two and began folding my moon trail photographs. So the next couple of images are from a group show at Photofusion in South London, and the rest from a group show in Fotogalerie Wien in Austria. As you can see, I don't always show the whole set. Anyway, eventually I had a collection of spaceships, rockets, shuttles, satellites and lunar craft, all made from folded photographs of lunar arcs. I worked on this piece over the course of 2 years whilst doing other projects, and it just so happened that it was also around this time I started reading news articles about the use of origami in the aeronautical industry. The piece then became a response to the growing appreciation, application and potential of paper folding being employed by NASA to help solve some of its engineering conundrums. I was of course using the techniques to satisfy slightly more playful urges. Okay, the next piece I'd like to describe is actually one I made for another Lumen project and exhibition, and was one which developed from a short residency Lumen organised up in Grisdale in the Lake District in 2018 in the UK. I now apologise to those that know all about this project, but for those that didn't see it, the residency title and the show title of In Search of Darkness was not surprisingly about highlighting the importance of preserving our dark sky areas. A hot topic actually at the moment, with SpaceX launching the Starlink satellite constellation chains last year and more planned in the future. Now, it's hardly a secret that the moon plays an important role in regulating the nocturnal behaviours of animals and plants, and that increased nighttime pollution, or nighttime light pollution, threatens this delicate balance, disrupting natural circadian rhythms and introducing widespread jet lag. My response to the theme focused on a small light sensor found in streetlights, which is used to facilitate auto-illumination during the hours of darkness. The device, known as a twilight switch, could be said to be one of the key contributors to sky glow and increased levels of light pollution, as it aids in the illuminating of thousands of our city streets and motorways. By repurposing this switch, the intention was to create an out-of-sync viewing experience, echoing the widespread nocturnal jet lag felt by much of the animal kingdom. The finished piece, titled The Moon is the Only Light We'll See, was a cluster of oversized, interconnected wooden bird box sculptures, designed in such a way as to disorientate and confuse the viewer. Approaching each box resulted in a different reaction occurring. It's not easy to tell from the images. However, the empty central box, for example, contained a mirror that simply showed the bottom of the box. An admittedly oblique reference to how light pollution can affect the nesting behaviours of birds. In the left bird box, a bright light greeted you and a photograph of the moon swung in and out of view, but only if activated by someone at the central box. Another light beckoned you to the right bird box, but on arrival the nocturnal scene suddenly glowed overly bright, obliterated by hundreds of LED lights. The last two works I'd like to talk about before I delve into the piece I have in the On Ancient Earth show are both pieces I am currently working on. The first will likely end up as a moving image piece and is part of a much larger body of work under the working title of The Next Generation, open brackets, After Eric, close brackets. Eric referring to Eric Renner, a photographer, author of Pinhole books and co-founder of the worldwide Pinhole Photography Day, which takes place on the last Sunday of April each year, and whom sadly died in early April this year. The whole body of work respectfully pays homage to him in kind of subtle ways, but particularly in the use of a tomato as a camera, which certainly tested my perseverance. However, I'll leave tomato cameras for another day. The current piece from the body of work that I'm going to show you is a short time-lapse film shot in my studio of the changing light conditions and subsequent shadows caused by pepper plants I started growing during lockdown, which now take up almost every windowsill and cover up half the windows of our flat. Lockdown gave me the chance to slow down and spend more time in my studio, which is at home, as well as noticing things immediately around me, including changes I usually wouldn't see. The enforced time at home also pushed me to become more resourceful, and I started growing pepper plants from the seeds of a shop-bought pepper, seeds I would usually have discarded. At first, I wasn't thinking about the creative potential in this endeavour. Slowly but surely, as I nurtured the seedlings, then the plants, I started to consider what the photographic and artistic possibilities of these most basic activities might be. The Next Generation, open brackets, After Eric, close brackets, project has been an opportunity for me to adopt a more holistic approach to my photographic practice. When it's completed, I will experiment with the pepper as a camera, the raw material for developing photographs, i.e. as an organic developer, and as subject. It was all too plain to see during lockdown that the planet breathed a little easier when traffic, planes and journeys stopped. I want to be a more eco-friendly analogue photographer, reducing toxicity and introducing more sustainability into my practice. And this is certainly a goal of mine going forward. Another project I'm currently working on, and which will likely take about 5 years to complete, is a collaboration between myself and Nicholas Middleton, an artist friend in London. While our movements were restricted, and because we live over 7,500 kilometres apart, we decided to develop a postal art piece in which we take turns shooting a photograph onto the same piece of film, using the same homemade camera. Each time one of us has used a camera, they send it over the Atlantic for the other to then use, and vice versa. The aim is to eventually record 47 different images onto the same piece of film. Now, there are a few rules that we're both following. Every image must be of the moon. It can be recorded during the day or at night, and in a variety of locations. It can be high, low to the horizon. The moon can be in open sky, or even near buildings or trees or other features. And long exposures are permitted if necessary or if an arc is desired. By the end of the project, the 47 pinholes camera, that's what we're calling the camera, will have travelled the same distance as that between the centre of the Earth and the centre of the moon during a supermoon, which is around 360,000 kilometres. We realise that this project involves an element of risk and a large slice of chance. There is high probability that the camera will go missing over the course of 46 Atlantic Ocean crossings, so we're also recording general data each time we take an image to document and complement the journey. Mundane and more scientific information is being recorded, but so too is a description of current affairs and even personal triumphs or tragedies. Now to the main event. Observing a baker's dozen, a lunar study in variations of size and shape. In case anyone hasn't had a chance to watch my piece yet, I thought I'd quickly show it, as it's only 47 seconds long, not including the titles. Then I'll talk a little about why I made it and how I made it. I suppose the first thing I should say is this is the first moving image piece I've made since my undergraduate degree show back in '99, and that previous piece was really only found CCTV footage that I edited. My work has always had a durational element due to the length of my photographic exposures, so time-based imagery isn't new to me completely. However, the final product as a moving image work is very much unexplored territory for me. Secondly, this piece was made specifically for this exhibition. I proposed a couple of ideas and Anna was interested in me developing one on craters made from household materials. So to the why. As I've previously mentioned, I've a bit of an obsession with the moon, and I'm a voracious consumer of anything and everything lunar related, especially if it involves some kind of fun fact, as I mentioned before. The weirder the better. I love a good fact. Over the past couple of years, I've been collecting these strange facts, and for this piece, I focused on harnessing ones related to lunar regolith recipes and lunar craters. My main sources included NASA's Educator's Instructional Guide, Exploring the Lunar Surface, and in particular Lesson 5, Craters Moon Study Activity, and Maggie Aldrin Pocock's Book of the Moon, which is a veritable feast of offbeat facts, many involving food. I've also just begun experimenting with time-lapse and the creative potential in the changing shadows of the plants in my studio that I showed a little earlier. So I knew for this new piece I wanted to combine the power of time-lapse to show time seen in the moving of shadows with a homemade lunar surface or landscape. Wanting to construct my own fictional lunar features was very much influenced by reading about and seeing the plaster models of scientists James Naismith and James Carpenter at the Science Museum, and how their photographs of these models in their 1874 publication, The Moon Considered as a Planet, a World and a Satellite, fooled many into thinking they were actual close-up images of the lunar surface. Their models and the subsequent photographs are truly amazing, and excuse the poor quality of my image of Naismith's model of the Maurolycus crater even. It was shot on my phone. I also visited the Henbury Meteorites Conservation Reserve, which is situated not far from Alice Springs, back in 2002, whilst travelling around Australia. My memory of which had all but faded until I read Anna's and Lumen's call out and it came flooding back. The reserve has 13 or 14 craters, depending on who you ask or which source you use, and this formed the basis of the number of craters I was to record, i.e. 13, and the subsequent title of A Baker's Dozen, which of course also relates to the use of baking ingredients in the piece. Speaking of the title, while I was gathering the footage for the piece, I was reading a book I'd found in a thrift store on the birth of photography, focusing on the pioneers and particularly the rivalry between Daguerre and Fox Talbot, but also the other lesser-known characters in the story. The book is called Capturing the Light and is a fascinating insight into society and the politics of the time and how this all influenced how different people from different countries reacted to the discovery. Anyway, the book also mentions Talbot's other achievements, including the many scientific papers he published, often with long and very specific titles. This gave me the idea for the title of my piece. It's intended to sound vaguely academic and simultaneously slightly absurd and perhaps a little fusty. Finally, I wanted the piece to have a feel reminiscent of the film footage and still photographs taken by the Apollo astronauts. The video format pays homage to the square film format of the Hasselblad cameras taken to the moon, while the moments of shakiness and blurriness mimic a loss of signal. The Hasselblad cameras also contained a transparent Rezo plate, which produced the distinctive crosses seen on all the NASA photographs. In case you're unaware, these were used to help the scientists back on Earth calibrate distances and heights. Would you believe? I still can't believe it. I too have employed a pseudo-Rezo plate in my piece. In this case, a cropped test photograph I took of the moon using my homemade 47 Pinhole's camera, mentioned previously, which brings me nicely to why 47 seconds in length. From the number of rockets supposedly strapped to Chinese official Wan Hu's chair to help him ascend to the moon, to the number of minutes of radio silence as you travel around the far side of the moon, the number 47 continually reappears whenever one reads about moon-related activities. It's become a number I often implement in my practice in all sorts of ways, as a parameter, a guide, a rule, a limit, in titles, etc. Another deliberate decision was to use duotone in the main footage, so why red? I chose to tone the film a reddish colour because I wanted it to relate to the Orenta lands and the regolith of Australia's red centre. When it was shown at the Earth Sanctuary, the piece was purposefully projected downwards and seen from above. I had considered using the colour of the dust and mud to give tone to the image. The red is a red of my memory. as it's been nearly 20 years since I was in the Northern Territory, a place that looks very alien, inhospitable, even extraterrestrial or Martian. So, the how. I thought I'd give a little insight into how I work and briefly describe some of the making process for this piece. When constructing the artificial lunar landscapes, I found flour sprinkled with a light dusting of cocoa powder from NASA's Lesson 5 worked particularly effectively, but also I used an all-sugar recipe, caster sugar, granulated sugar and icing sugar. In addition, a combination of 35mm film canisters glued to an old floor tile or bit of carpet using construction adhesive, basically no more nails, produces convincing crater forms when carefully peeled apart. I actually discovered this accidentally when I stuck one of my canister pinhole cameras to a nest box a couple of years ago. Most of the time-lapse footage was shot outside, at the mercy of the sun, and because I wanted the shadows to be as visible as possible, I often had to tilt my rudimentary lunar model to maximise their angle and strength. Not too dissimilar, in fact, to the raking light effect employed by Naismith and Carpenter. And of course, despite taking hundreds of stills, I was abruptly reminded when editing how individual frames and sequences can be quickly exhausted when converted to moving image. So, we've pretty much come to the end of the talk. Now I realise as this talk is recorded, I am unable to immediately answer any questions, if any, that anyone might have, assuming that you're all still awake and haven't nodded off. However, I'm very happy to respond to questions, thoughts, observations, etc. And I'm sure if you direct them to either Anna or Louise, they can forward them on to me. Otherwise, you can contact me directly through my website, which is listed on the Lumen Ancient Earth Talks page. I want to again thank Anna and Louise and the rest of the Lumen team for letting me present my work today and for giving me special permission to record my talk. I would really have liked to have joined you all and also hear Joe's talk and of course the other talks in the series. I look forward to watching them online at some point soon. Stay safe, everyone.
That was absolutely gorgeous. Thank you for joining us today, guys. Another really, really interesting session. Again, always really interesting resonances between the speakers and new ideas formed by listening to talks in tandem.